Welcome to another episode of Pearls with Janice. Today we're going to talk about lesson planning. We're going to talk about the Charlotte Danielson model for teaching effectiveness, domains 2 and 3. Having those as our topics, I would say that my target audience are future teachers, current teachers, administrators, supervisors who do teacher evaluation and teacher in service, parents, those of you who are interested in what I believe is good school reform that's going on to better the environment and the instructional experiences for your children. So I think this is also good for you. Substitute teachers, I left that out. Substitute teachers, this is perfect for you, or those of you who are thinking of subbing. Okay, now let's go to a document. This happens to be a Rutgers University document on lesson plan components. That's the first part tonight. We're going to talk about lesson plan components. Okay, I'm going to take a seat for a minute. All right. Lesson plan components. Right here you see a document from Rutgers where they talk about, I'm having trouble with my earpiece, sorry, where they talk about what components should be in a lesson plan. Now, we obviously understand that a lesson plan has to be generated around enduring understandings or unit goals, because a lesson that we're teaching is usually one component, could be 1 day, could be a 2-day lesson that is a part of a larger unit, okay? So teachers create a unit plan, and within that unit plan there are sub-chunks of the content which are parts of the content which we call the individual lessons, okay? The lessons have essential questions that we believe, what is the overarching question that will stimulate thought and will be answered in more than one word during the lesson. We are looking for our students today to leave with not just low-level recall of facts and information, but of understanding, as they say, essential questions and larger, pieces of information, larger concepts. Understanding the big concept is really what it is, the big question. Okay, now I'm going to scoot down for the creation of this lesson plan to the parts where obviously we're going to have to identify the standards addressed. Now, absolutely, if you're in the state of New Jersey, you will have the New Jersey core curriculum content standards identified if you are teaching social studies or science or some other content. If, and this has to be updated, this document, but if you are teaching English language arts or mathematics, then you will have the New Jersey Common Core standards for those disciplines identified right here. Now, you're going to find on the internet or at the college where you are going or the university or from a book from ASCD or someone that has different formats for lesson planning. Doesn't matter what the format looks like as long as you have all of the important components, okay? So make sure you have your standards. What is the lesson objective? Now, in today's educational reform setting for our students, we are telling teachers, and actually we've been saying this for many, many years, but right now it's becoming a must. We are asking teachers to write the objective for the lesson and the point of the lesson right on the whiteboard or the smartboard or somewhere in the room so that the students understand the purpose for what it is that we're going to be doing today, or today and tomorrow, or the next 3 days, or whatever. Okay, you're also going to list the materials that are needed, all right? You're going to talk about the 21st century learning that you're doing. What type of technology are you using in this lesson for either you or the students? Now, we've always talked about an anticipatory set. What is the hook? What is it that you're going to do or utilize to capture the student's attention and bring relevance and importance to the students regarding this subject matter? Now, I'm going to just deviate for a minute. There is a new book that came out maybe a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I read it last year, called Teach Like a Pirate. I'm very sorry, I can't remember the name of the author at this moment. I'm taking this out, so I'm hoping that this all works out, even though I took my earphone out, but it was driving me crazy. Okay, there's a book called Teach Like a Pirate. It was written by a teacher, and what he says is teachers need to be passionate and enthused about the content that they are teaching, or don't expect the students to be excited or engaged as they need to be in order to learn. Now, read that book. He has some wonderful tips. Maybe I'll do a Pearls with Janice session on showing you a few good books to read, but one is Teach Like a Pirate. It's a quick read, an easy read, but boy, you will leave that book, if you are a current teacher or a future teacher, saying, I am going to do everything he says, because he makes some excellent points. And one of the points he makes is you have to have a hook, okay? Now, the process is nothing more than the roadmap for your lesson. What are you going to do first? How many minutes do you expect it to take? What will you do second? Etc., etc., etc. Now, the lesson plan also must have your check for understanding. Now, if this is the middle of the unit or the beginning of the unit, you are not going to do what they call a summative assessment. That is finding out what they learned in terms of the entire unit. But for every lesson you teach every day, there needs to be some sort of formative assessment. It can be informal. It can be as informal as at the end of the day, at the end of this 42-minute lesson, or hopefully it's a 90-minute lesson, you will ask the students before they exit your room to give you a little summary of what they learned today. You can use a KWL chart. What I already knew, what I wanted to learn, and what I did learn today, as an exit ticket before they leave your room. So that there are ideas that I'll mention a lot more about that. Now, let's talk about independent practice. You can introduce information, you can teach information. However, there has to be a time on task. You have to have a component in here in the lesson where your students are engaged in doing. And when I do a video on cooperative learning, I'm going to talk more and more about that. We all know that if you tell me, I'll remember it for a short amount of time. If you show me, I'm going to remember it a little bit longer. If you let me get engaged in doing or applying, I'm going to learn it, and it's going to be retained in my mind and in my kinesthetic ability. Okay? So, next part, very, very important. Differentiated instruction. What modifications do you need to make in order for all learners to succeed with this lesson? Now, I want to tell you, just because differentiated instruction and these modifications and accommodations is way down at the bottom of this document, I want you to be thinking of it right from the start. And that is something that they call, and I'm going to write it on my board, even though I have something else up here, universal design. The term universal design really came from the world of architecture. And it is what architects do when they're planning a building. What they do is they think about having equal access to that building for everyone. So there may be ramps for someone who may be in a wheelchair. There may be larger stalls in the bathroom. There may be wider hallways in certain areas. If it's a church, I've seen wider pews so that wheelchairs, again, can fit in those pews. So universal design doesn't come after the building is built. And then they say, oh, I wonder how we're going to have access for all. They think about the universal design right from the beginning of the design of that building. Well, let's apply it to a lesson. The moment you think about your unit and your lesson plan, you need to start thinking about the specific needs of the students within your audience or your class. You will probably have, in this day, we probably have students who are English language learners. So the accommodations, the modifications, whatever it is to help them access the content and be successful with the content has to be built into your lesson plan. The next would be your students with learning disabilities. Students with learning disabilities, you would think about what the disability is for each student, and you would have accommodations or modifications for that. You probably, if you have students with a special need that comes under the area of special education with an individual education plan, you possibly and probably have a co-teacher that, or a member of the child study team who is the case manager for that student, but a co-teacher or the resource room teacher who that student may also go to during the day for instruction will also assist you in planning this lesson so it meets the needs of that student. In addition, and don't forget this, the student who needs enrichment. If you have a child who is gifted and talented, and remember that's only your top 3 to 5%, or your students that are in need of enrichment, that's maybe your top 10% who are overachievers or hard workers who just really do a good job and are ready for more. You need to differentiate the instruction via the lesson plan to be ready for those students. Now, don't forget, when you teach a lesson, if this lesson is on English language arts, make sure that you have some objectives right up here that prove that you have some interdisciplinary components. That means you may merge science with your English language arts lesson. You may merge social studies. You may merge music. But when you do, and I'm not going to say if you do, when you do, in standards, you have to identify those standards up here as well. Okay? Now, how is it tied to other subjects? The next thing is that assessment or rubric. How will you assess the student's understanding of the concepts, the strategies, the skills? What will you do to know that the objectives of the lesson in the larger unit were met? Multiple forms of assessment should be used and described here. That's where I said it could be a test. It could be informal observation of the student. It could be the exit ticket. It could be a KWL chart. It could be asking the student to do a learning journal and write a paragraph or so. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in that to come up with that for your formative assessment. Okay, what I'd like to do right now, and I'm looking on this, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit, and I'm going to come back up. I want to talk a little bit with you about learning objectives and those students' special needs. Many of our classrooms today, most of them, if not all of them, are made up of students with different cognitive levels and abilities. And we talked about that. We have to, if we're going to create our lesson plan as a universal designed lesson, we're going to think about those students. I'm going to show you a little something. It's and we're going to take a look at the URL on this so that you are ready to go take a look at it. But it is Bloom's Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. Those of you who take curriculum courses, those of you who take any education courses should be familiar with Benjamin Bloom's hierarchy of educational cognitive objectives. Now, I'm going to show you something a little new when it comes to Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin Bloom's taxonomies of educational objectives is a hierarchy, the cognitive process dimension of Bloom. And let's go down here first. First of all, let's look at the URL. Here's the URL. Can you see that? See it? Get that down. Teaching resources, effective practice, / revised Bloom's taxonomy. Now, the truth is, this is revised. This isn't the one that when I was taking my curriculum courses back in 1974, hate to tell you, probably 1973 as well, the chart was a little different. Now, let's take a look at it. Here we go. Remember is a lower level cognitive ability. It's the ability to retrieve relevant knowledge from long-term memory. So, if you are studying something, a concept, and you believe that your students, and I'll show you later what analysis is, are ready for breaking material into constituent parts and determining how these parts relate to one another, that's analysis. That's not easy to do. As you can see, it's a higher level of the cognitive index. But you have a student in your room who you've just been studying plants, and some of your students are going to be able to break down the content and analyze what you've been talking about, plants. However, one student or two students in your room isn't ready for that level of cognition. Therefore, you're going to adapt, you're going to modify the lesson for this student, him or her, and you're going to make it something where the student just has to retrieve relevant knowledge. Okay? All right, we're going to come back up to this chart, or that diagram. I want to show you this chart. Lower order thinking is remembering, recognize, identify, recall, retrieve. A second order would be understanding, interpretation. So you ask them, please interpret, please classify, please illustrate, please represent on this chart, please categorize, please summarize, please generalize. These are the verbs that you would ask the student to use. I am going to do a cooperative learning YouTube video for my Pearls very soon, if not tonight. And it will have the verbs that you will use for creating these assignments. But this can give you a little bit of an idea. And then all the way up to differentiating where the student analyzes or evaluates a higher level thinking. And the highest order is to create, to construct, to plan, and to design. Now, this new revised Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives is magnificent, because watch this. If you are teaching a lesson that has to do with metacognitive lesson, then, and the student is at the first level of cognitive ability, then go up here. It shows you an assignment. Identify strategies for retaining information. Predict one's response to culture shock. These are examples of the verbs: use, deconstruct, reflect on, create. And you see how that works, okay? You must take down this URL and visit this page. It's really valuable. Okay, so we did our lesson plan. We talked about the important components. We talked about how to level your instructional tasks for your students, although I will talk much more detail on the cooperative learning portion or video that I do. Now, let's talk about Charlotte. Now, the reason that I went to this, and I want you to see DanielsModel.org framework. It is very important, and I'm going to stand up for this. It is very important that you understand that as a teacher or as a future teacher, you are going to be evaluated on a framework such as the Charlotte Danielson framework for effective teaching. Many school districts, as a matter of fact, many universities and colleges have adopted it for their teacher education program. Danielson's framework for teaching. There are 4 components. Okay, the first domain 1 is preparation and planning of teaching. Domain 4 is professional responsibility of a teacher. But we're going to talk about domains 2 and 3. Domain 2 is, and you can go on this, here we are. We're going to do it right here. Domain 2 is classroom environment, creating an environment of respect and rapport, establishing a culture for learning, managing classroom procedures, managing student behavior, and organizing physical space. In order to truly, and I'm gonna come up on this for a minute, if I can get it. Okay, I'm having a little trouble with that. But in order to truly meet the components of 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, and 2E, you must get to know them. So first, what I recommend is you go to this website or get a book that you may have in your school library. And I have this one. Can you see it? Professional Practice. I have another one, a more up-to-date one, but it is excellent. It's a 2nd edition of Framework for Teaching. Now, what these books have, what this book has that I'm not seeing on this website, but it may be there, and these are copies from my book. I mean, this is, as I say, this is how much I use this book when I did evaluations on teachers and when I wanted to learn it so that it became part of me. I would write the domains, I'd write what the elements are, the components, the elements, and the indicators. Because, for example, under 2A, creating an environment of respect and rapport. Well, I have news for you. That's pretty general. What does that mean if you were videotaping me teaching What is it that you would expect to see or hear in my classroom environment that would prove that I have an environment of respect and rapport? Well, I'm going to read it to you. And it came from this book. The elements under 2A are, number 1, teacher interactions with students, including both words and actions. So now we're talking about body language, facial expression, as well as the words that come out of your mouth, as well as the words that come out of the students' mouths. So this is true school reform, because even our students need to understand what you expect from them in terms of their facial expression, body language, and verbal language. And it's the same for the teacher. Now, let me finish that. A teacher's interactions with students set the tone for the classroom. Through their interactions, teachers convey that they care about their students. Now, there's a second element of component 2A. Now, I'm only talking about 2A. Student interactions with other students, including both words and actions. I love it. Finally, we are asking people to be cognizant of their body language, facial expression, as well as the words that come out of their mouth. How students treat each other is as important as how teachers treat students, and arguably for students even more important. At its worst, poor treatment results in bullying, which can poison the environment of an entire school. At its best, positive interactions among students are mutually supportive and create an emotionally healthy school environment. It's the teacher's responsibility both to model and teach students how to engage in respectful interactions with one another. Now, how do you know if 2A, those two elements, are really occurring when I videotape your lesson? Because these are the indicators that I'm going to look for. Now, again, I'm going to look on the internet for this, but right now I am the only place I found the indicators is in this book. Okay? All right, let me read you the indicators for 2A. Respectful talk and turn taking. Attention to students' background and their lives outside of the classroom. Teacher and student body language. The physical proximity of the teacher, obviously, to the students. No more sitting at your desk. Can't do it. We have to be moving around the room. Otherwise, you're never going to know. Hold on. You're never going to be able to do domain 2-4. 2-4. 2-4 is managing student behavior, monitoring student behavior, and responding to student misbehavior. The only way you can get, and some of the ratings for a teacher go up to distinguished. The only way you're going to get distinguished on that is if you are moving about the room and you have close proximity to students. Okay? So, let me finish the indicators for 2A. Warmth and caring. Politeness and dignity. Encouragement. The use of active listening. Do you know what that is? Tom Gordon's effectiveness training included, that was written back in the 70s, included the phrase or the concept of active listening. Someone says something and I, the teacher, or another student respond back, it sounds like you are saying. So I care enough to get the point of what Johnny Jones said by feeding back to him what I think he said, and then he can feed back to me whether I was correct or fix it if I misinterpreted what he was saying. And fairness, okay? So, remember, each one of the elements, or the components, under domain 2, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, and 2E, and they're all here, have elements under them that give you a better picture of what's expected of you when we come in and watch you in the classroom and evaluate you, or when you complete a video of your teaching and have to submit it to someone. And the indicators also under each component. They're there. Now, I'm going to go to domain 3. This is the biggest one. Look at this. 3B. Using questioning and discussion techniques. Let me flip to 3B. I got news for you. That's true school reform. If we really are holding teachers and classrooms responsible to have discussions going on between and among students and the teacher, then it's true school reform, because we're not truly holding discussions yet. Those of you who have gotten distinguished, you may be, and that's great. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to get to proficient or distinguished. Don't get all excited about distinguished all the time. It's hard to be at distinguished all the time. Let's all get to proficient and then touch it distinguished as much as we can. Okay? Now, 3C. Here it is. Engaging... 3B. I want to go to 3B. Okay. Where's it? 3C. 3B. Here it is. Using questioning, prompts, and discussion techniques. The elements under that component 3B is what I'm talking about. I'm going to tell you what the elements are and the indicators. The elements are quality of questions and prompts. Questions of high quality cause students to think and reflect, to deepen their understanding, and to test their ideas against those of their classmates. When teachers ask questions of high quality, they ask only a few of them, and they provide students with think time, sufficient time to think about the responses, to reflect on the comments of their classmates, and to deepen their understanding. Occasionally, for the purposes of review, teachers ask students a series of usually low-level questions. But that is not the level of which we're looking for in this element or component. We are looking for deeper thinking. This may be helpful for the purpose of establishing the facts of a historical event, for example, but the question should not be confused, those one-word answer questions, with the use of questions that deepen a student's understanding. The next element under 3B component is discussion techniques. Now, I have news for you. We are not holding discussions, and I said it before. Listen to how this is stated. Some teachers report that we discussed X, Y, or Z in class today, when what they really meant is, I talked about X, Y, or Z to the students. That is, some teachers confuse discussion with an explanation of content. As important as explanation is, it's not that next element that we want to see in our classrooms. We want our students to experience, and that is discussion, a true discussion. Rather, in a true discussion, a teacher poses a question and invites all students' views to be heard. and also enables students to engage in discussion directly with one another, not always mediated by the teacher. But I am telling you right now, our students are not ready to do this unless we teach them how. And we have to teach them by giving them sound bites or phrases that they can use to start the discussion, to keep the discussion going, to enter it even though they're a little timid, or to turn the discussion in a different direction because they don't agree. All of the time. Content in your lesson plans, as well as how to think about Charlotte Danielson's evaluation system and how it all fits. I ask you, let me see if I can do this now. Okay, I'm coming up now. I ask you to go on to www.pearlswithjanice.com, subscribe, and in this way, you just hit subscribe, and in this way, as I put up the additional videos, you will get notice of it at your Gmail account. Thank you.